All right, Tim, let's
You.
move in to the fishing topic before we
All
make
right.
this too long.
I know. Jesus
That's
Christ.
okay.
Sorry. I keep.
No,
I can't
it's fine.
stop.
Keep going on side areas, but it's okay. Um, again, our schedules have been messed up, so it's been a while. But also, um, I've said this before though, and watch. I don't know how much we're going to really have to talk about on this topic. Like, I don't know how.
Sure.
I don't know if there's not a ton load here, but it was one of those light bulb moments where we're starting to get into the season where birds are migrating.
Yes.
And so you just look up any given moment when you're outside here in Minnesota now, and birds are migrating. You just see them.
Yeah.
And I was like, huh. I wonder what migrating birds like do to fish. Cause like I've always heard that, oh, this lake is all full of leeches now because the ducks brought them.
Oh.
Yeah. You've never heard that one before, huh? Judging by your
Mm.
reaction.
No, I mean, I guess I could see that, but I haven't heard that.
Sure.
I've heard people talking shit about the coots.
Right.
They don't like the coots. They'll be like fucking coots, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what's up with the coots? You know, like I don't know. I don't have them on my like, so I just
Right.
don't know what the be. And I've been to lakes where the coots are there, but I don't know. Never really looked into what the deal is. But
I don't know why people have such a big problem or like why there's a general dislike for them, other than the fact that like they are there's large populations of them, so they seem to be able to have, and I don't know this for a fact, but they seem to be able to have more offspring than your average duck, than your average waterfowl. And nobody eats them because they're what everybody calls a mud duck. Like all of the vegetation that they eat is growing in the muck and the mud. And you can see this because coots have like chicken feet. They don't have webbed feet. So they're barely a waterfowl even.
I see.
Yeah, so it's
And
almost like a stigma sort of around them in a way.
I suppose that makes everything all dingy, and if they're constantly like rutting up the ground.
Yeah. Well, and they don't taste good. So like if you hunt birds, you don't like them because they don't taste good. Apparently, I mean, I've heard they're not horrible, but
okay, yeah. But yeah, anyways, I didn't know much about the like leech things, but it seems to make sense.
Yeah,
but yeah. You've heard that people saying that the leeches got
yeah. So
ducks?
I've heard people say that before, that like the migrating birds bring in the ducks. They just use the ducks. Oh, the ducks brought the leeches in or something like that. So I tried to do, and this might be a future topic, I don't know, but I couldn't find anything on the internet where it was like, what do migrating birds do to fish? Like what is there a correlation there at all? Is there any sort of thing? And that was, so I was just going to kind of bring that to you and just say like, do you ever fish anything during migration? Do you see anything different? Because the internet's flat with it. And that's how I got to fish migration.
Yeah.
Is from this original question.
Yeah. No, I guess I don't know. I guess I've never even really like thought of like trying to correlate the two.
Yeah.
I don't think it changes much.
No.
But I suppose I'm not on a lot of the lakes where I've heard anybody talking about like the ducks bringing the leeches. I suppose I could see how that would be like if a duck brings a different food source and the leeches fall off. That would make more sense to why some of these fish would actually be like looking for a leech that was swimming around. Like, oh, that one came off of the ducks. Yeah,
sure.
like happy day. I got one of these swimming leeches here.
Right.
Go and snatch it up.
You don't fish a lot of water with a lot. Let me say that again. You're not fishing too many bodies of water that have a lot of migrating birds on it either, are you? Or are you?
Well, like ducks and loons. but not anything besides that.
Oh, okay.
Because those are both migratory, you know.
Yeah, for
Loons
sure.
will get up and leave and stuff, but the loons are just eating the bait fish like anything else, and
Mm-hmm.
they'll stick around for a while, and then um the ducks also, you know, head out. But I've never really seen any correlation between the two. I know that the fish migrate, you know, just like the birds do.
Right. And that's exactly because of this question. That's exactly how I got onto to the fish migration. It's like, okay, yeah, we're gonna talk about fish migration.
Sure.
But before we go, hey, help fund us over on RealAF.TV,
Oh,
realaf.tv/Patreon. More funds. Maybe we'll do some science and figure out if there is a correlation between migrating birds or not. Huh? Maybe.
hell yeah.
Because I can't
Maybe.
find anything on the internet. It's like somebody has to just, here's a hypothesis. Let's go fucking try some
Right.
science. But that's how I got onto it, to fish migration, because I was like, oh, fuck, dude, I didn't even think of that. And big shout out to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They actually have an entire, so this is our entire topic. All my research is based off of, they have a teacher's program, like a teacher's pamphlet, and
Okay.
it's called Fish Need to Move. And so
Oh,
everything I
yeah.
did research on is literally made for, I think it said 5th to 8th grade classrooms. So
Hell
yeah, so that's, I'm going to bring you a lesson made for the public school system. So
yeah. Nice.
get your
dude.
miscellaneous art supplies, your rulers, your popsicle sticks, your pipe cleaners, your clay, because we're learning today.
I got crayons.
I got crayons. Yes. I literally none of those stuff. I just wanted to say, like, this, it actually had a list of those things on there on the teaching plan. And I was like, I'm just gonna say it out loud.
Nice.
Because
That's
this is
awesome.
great.
Dude, how ironic is this too? Like, I literally don't even know why I have crayons. I just
Right.
like
It's so weird. You actually have crayons.
I'm guessing by the 4 colors where I have red, yellow, green, and blue. I'm like, these must have been in my pocket from like a restaurant.
From
we
a
went
restaurant.
to.
Yep.
And then
You sat
they
down
just
to
ended
record and you
up-
went, oh yeah, fuck.
I just like, I don't even think about it. They've just been here for a while and it doesn't like even hit me anymore. There's just like random kids shit all over my house. So then you're like, grab your stuff, and I'm like, oh shit, look at that, I got
Look at-
crayons.
I do. I got crayons. That's great. So anyways, it also has a video. So this plan has a video with it. So like it's like a 2-minute YouTube video that you're supposed to use to like kick this off. And I'm not going to sit here and play it, but in the video they said, you look up in the sky and you see migrating birds and you see it all the time. You don't think about fish have to migrate. Fish need to move. Fish are migrating all the time, but out of sight, out of mind. And I was like, damn, I have a fishing podcast and I am exactly that. I just did that and then got caught into it. It's like, good for you, Fish and Wildlife Service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the big point is fish migrate. They typically do it in the fall and the spring as well. Do you know, Tim, like, do you know of different, is there a bigger migration in the summer? Like, is there anything that you know about timing? Because everything that I can think of, everything that I saw, it was pretty much spring and fall.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's pretty much spring and fall because it's a lot of, it's more so water temperature than it is the time of year.
Right.
So
yeah,
it's just what happens. That's why fish will do their same thing different times of year in different areas.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were just chatting about in Tasmania, that their winter is our summer. It's 50 degrees down there when it's heat, you know, so they're
right.
they're doing the same shit that we're doing in the spring and the fall and different time frames. So it's all the temperature,
Right.
because they're they're cold-blooded. Their
Mhm.
metabolism depends on them.
Depends on their surroundings.
Yeah, so they're trying to move to the water temperatures that they feel most comfortable. Different species like different water temps, so it all depends on what species you're going for. They all move.
Right.
And it's
Right.
really just that changing of the water temperature. So when stuff gets stable is when you can establish a pattern a little bit better,
Right.
you know? And it's the dropping of the temperature in the fall makes them retreat eventually, and it's kind of weird because they just kind of do like a back and forth thing, like a like bass are I know best, so I can speak on that better. But it's
Yeah.
like we'll start like in spring they move up into the shallows, they do their spawning thing because the waters are warming up, but also they like want to feed and stuff, so they're moving into where the waters are warm.
Yep.
And then when the water temperatures start to get hot in summer, they'll start moving out into the deeper water and kind of like offshore structures. They can find humps and all this other stuff,
Mhm.
but they'll
Mhm.
also be in like deep weed edges. But even during the day, like if they want to feed when the water temperature drops a little bit in the morning and they want to come up and try to eat some stuff, sometimes they'll move up into the shallows in the morning, or they'll stay
Mhm.
in the shallows because the weeds give them that comfortable temperature where they want to stay and stuff. But
Oh, right.
for the most part, they're moving up in the spring, and then they're dropping back out in the summer, and then they're moving back up in the fall when the water temperature starts to drop again a little bit. So it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
kind of warm, get into a comfortable spot in the fall, and then they'll move back out deep when it hits, winter months.
When it gets too cold to be up shallow, right?
Yeah, so it's just
Yeah.
a back and forth game. It's like
Right.
in for spring, out for summer, in for fall, out for winter, and then
Yeah.
just keep repeating.
Yeah. And I never thought about it until you started to talk about it, and with that back and forth. It's like, yeah, that's exactly what the birds are doing, right? Like
Yeah,
they're
dude.
called Canadian geese. And so
Right.
they're getting the hell out of there when it's super cold, and
Yeah.
then they're going back when it's
Yeah.
nesting weather. Like
Right.
you can hang out in the tundra in the
Yep.
summer, and you got to get the hell out
Yeah.
of there when it's cold because you just can't make it. There's no
Yeah.
food.
Well, it's like the common loons will fly down south too, and then they
Sure.
come back. We actually had problems with that this year,
Oh, really?
where the loons can't walk for shit.
Yeah.
So
I just learned
they
about that.
they just swim for the most part.
Right.
And because they came back when it was like starting to warm up, and then it got cold again and just stayed cold.
Yeah.
There was like loons just like not doing well. They couldn't go from like they were just like on land and stuff like that. They were like
Oh, shit.
trying to
Really?
fly and like just falling out of the sky. Yeah. It
Damn.
was too cold to fly and they can't walk. So they would
Right.
just land on the ground and they just kind of sit there.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But I think some people saved them. They're big ass birds, dude.
That's a big bird.
When you see them
It's
up
weird.
close.
It's weird.
Yeah. They scare
So,
the shit out of you when they swim underneath your boat. You're like, whoa.
what? Holy shit.
Yeah. I've had it happen a couple of times. I had a young one chasing my musky lure once. Like
Oh,
it wasn't
no.
eating it. It was just like playing like a puppy.
Oh.
It was just kind of like swimming after it. And then after I would like reel it in and lift it up to the boat,
Uh-huh.
it would come up to the surface and it'd be sitting floating and just kind of like looking at me.
No way, dude.
Kind of just like, what's up with that? And then I'd
What's up
like
with
cast
that,
it
dude?
out and retrieve it again and it'd dive. And then it'd follow it back in. It wouldn't hit it again. And then the same thing. I'd lift it up and then it'd like be looking at me. It was almost like it
Weird.
was trying to learn.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it was crazy.
That is crazy.
When it followed it in, because like in the clear water, you see the muskies follow it in,
Sure.
and you always get excited.
Yep.
And when I saw that loon follow it in, like it's so wide, they're so much bigger than you think because they're way wider than a fish.
Oh,
So when
yeah.
you
Of course
see it,
they
you're like,
are.
"Whoa, what the fuck?
What the fuck is that thing?
Was it the loon's choosing?" Yeah, and then you just get all excited. Loon's chasing my lure. Look at that.
Crazy.
And you're like, don't eat it, don't eat it. You lift it up and then you cast it out again. And he chases it again. You're just like, oh my god, you're just playing with it. That's sweet.
That's so weird.
Yeah,
Um, oh yeah, okay. So the in and out of the fish, the ebb and flow of like where they go.
yeah,
Until I started reading this, I didn't think about that is migration. It's a form of migration. And so I looked up
yeah,
like, okay, what is this? What does migration really mean? Because for me, it's like it's a longer distance thing. And so I looked up Webster and it says to pass usually periodically from one region or climate to another for feeding or breeding. So I went, yeah, climate. So it
yeah.
must be like a decent distance. But then you said the way you said it is just like, they'll go to shallows and then they'll go back down and they'll go up to the
Yeah,
shallow and go back down. And it's it's a steady thing that happens with the water temperature, and it doesn't necessarily have to be super far. This is happening, what you just described is happening in lakes. In fact, we've talked about that a bunch of times
right.
on the podcast, and I
Yeah,
never thought about it as migration, but that's totally a
yeah,
migration. So like as
yeah.
a fisherman, you go, "Oh, I follow migration just like a bird hunter follows migrations."
Exactly. Yeah, you just got to figure out where they went to and where they're at and why they're there. Yeah, the different days and stuff. The part that makes it crazier with fish is that like a time of year for birds, you just be like, this is when they go down there to sit in this warm. And
Mhm.
with fish, they have that opportunity to change it so fast. Like
Oh,
birds
yeah.
literally have to fly, hundreds, if not
Oh,
thousands of miles to
uh-huh.
change the weather like that.
Right?
And a bass can just be like, I'm going to go from the shallows where the sun is beating down and the water temperature is like 65 right now in the fall,
Mhm.
or I'm going to go to the depths where it's like 50,
Right.
and it's a matter of swimming out in certain cases because of how deep the steep the drop
The
off is.
drop is, sure.
Could be like I'm swimming out 50 feet and
Right.
going down 20.
Right.
It doesn't even take them long to get there.
Right.
So there is definitely that migration, and it's all about finding the fish, and you kind of just got to put together what time of year it is and what they're doing and where they're going.
Yeah.
It's like the best example of that is like when I had the spawn, like when in the crappie spawn video, if you go to the YouTube channel and you see our crappie spawn video, is
Mhm.
just like, well, the crappies, they migrate. We've talked about it in the winter too, where I'm trying to figure out like, why are these, you know, ice houses
All clustered
seemingly
in one
not where they
spot.
would be in the summer and stuff. And it's because,
Right.
well, their migratory pattern of the crappie and stuff are to go over the biggest, like the deepest drop, because the crappies like to suspend. So these
Mhm.
schools of crappie are literally able to do that migration at a moment's notice of just like, I'm going to drop deeper, I'm going to come up, I'm going, so
Yeah.
they're in the deepest spot of the lake because they have that luxury of just being like, well, we're gonna come up today, or we're gonna go deep, or we're gonna move in, we're gonna move out, like whatever
Yeah.
they want to do.
Right.
They have the access to everything in that one spot, being over the deepest spot of the lake.
Yeah.
It gives them you know all the different options. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
um
For
but
sure.
with the spawn, with the crappie spawn in the video, is those crappies, it's getting to springtime, they're
Mhm.
moving into the pre-spawn, which is like the water's warming up again, they're moving to like a little bit deeper water just off of where they'll move up to. So instead of actually moving
Mm.
into the shallows where they will be spawning and where the water
Mhm.
is warming up,
Mhm.
they're just off of it where the water, the the fucking my brain's not working, like the break line, it goes
Yeah,
from like shallow water to like deep water. They're
sure.
just off of where it breaks, and they're sitting in that deep water just off of the shallow water, like close
Okay.
enough to see where they're at, but they're where they want to be, where it's comfortable, where they can still retreat if they
Yeah.
want to, but they're just kind of waiting for their moment, and then they move up. And literally, when we made that video, when not the crappie spawn video where I'm actually catching crappies and stuff,
Yeah.
was I think like a week or a week and a half after we filmed the the
The
live
live video?
podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
And the live podcast, I had nothing there because the water temperature hadn't rose to where it was at. So the
Uh-huh.
fish had migrated from their winter spots, but they were kind of in that purgatory, if you will,
Sure.
between realms. Just get all deep with it.
Yeah, dude.
So
Get nerdy on it.
yeah. So it's just sitting out there waiting for, it's not in its winter location, and it's not quite in its spring, early spring spawning location. And
Right.
then the water temperature rose that next week, and boom, just like that, when the water temperature rose, those fish knew, hey, it's time to get down.
Time.
And
Yeah.
then they got up in there and did their business. So, they migrate based off of the different water temperatures, and like the birds, the air temperatures, and then also based off
Yep.
of, what they got to do.
Right. Yeah.
They'll
Knowing that there's
move
like a
back.
certain window of time even
Yeah.
for fertility or whatever you want to say that
Yeah.
to make it
Yeah.
work.
Because the birds will do the same thing where they're just like, oh, we
Right.
were down there, and now we can feel that the temperature is turning, spring's coming. We got to fly back up there and find ourselves a good spot to make a nest. Now that
Right.
it's warming up to do our thing. So
And
it's
fish do the same
totally,
thing, right? Like they move up to make
they
a
lay
nest, right?
eggs. They go, yep, they lay eggs. They go
Yeah.
to their spot. They make their bed.
Yeah.
It's a different terminology, but it's
Right.
very similar shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A bed versus a nest, right? Like a fish makes a bed. Is that what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And maybe some of the birds make a bed. I don't know. I'm not a
There's
big,
some birds that are ground nesters, but I think they're just called they
yeah.
nest on the ground. But it's the same concept of what you're saying with a fish.
Yeah.
So
Dude,
let me ask the
there's
question.
when they're in the city, I'd throw this out there too, because I didn't know it ever happened. When they're in the city, sometimes they'll just make a nest wherever they find a good spot. Because there was a mallard that made a nest like at the behind these two buildings. There's like two buildings that have like a driveway in between, and there's different docks. And at the bottom of one of the steps, there was like an electrical box, and right along the electrical box was just a bunch of like straw and shit that had like blown into that area.
Okay.
And that mallard just kind of like moved it into a nest and had eggs
No
at the
way.
bottom of the steps in this industrial park area. There's
Whoa.
nothing around except for concrete and tar, except for this pile of shit that had blown into this area.
Yeah.
That the mallard was just like, good a spot as any.
He's like, hey, start halfway made. I'm gonna go for it.
What are you gonna do? I'm in the city. Hey, this is where I was born and raised. My kids will grow up here. They're gonna be born here. You think I can't just have a couple of little chicklets in the back of this? Whatever.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
So, you said that fish could like just move, and they can make their migration fairly quickly. Where birds, it takes time. Almost all birds, it takes quite a while because they're flying a larger distance. But
sure,
what I would define and even the definition, right, is to move from one region or a climate to another for feeding or breeding. So when the water temp changes, that can happen fairly quickly,
yeah,
like over a couple days, we'll say, right? And the fish can make their move fairly quickly, maybe within a couple hours even.
Mm-hmm.
But to call it a migration, I think is still right, because you correct me if I'm wrong, because this wasn't in this we'll get into what I saw in this, in this fish and wildlife thing, but isn't it safe to say that they move into, like, they make a migration and then they're there for a while? It's not like they're jumping back and forth between
Right.
these things like every other day
Yeah.
or once a week or
No.
some shit like that, right?
Yeah, I think there's certain times where they can move in and out. Like, in the middle of the summer, the bass can move up to feed, and some of the other ones will do that too, where they'll move into the shallows to feed and then they'll move back out. So I think it's a little bit different than a bird,
Okay.
but it's still very close to the same. Like, for the most part, it is those time of years where they will all move. All of them are going to go out deep, and then some are going to, like, if you go fish the shallows when you're ice fishing and stuff,
Yeah.
I don't think there's much up there except for like northern, or just kind of like roaming.
Oh,
The
just
pike are just kind of roaming up there,
yeah,
just
because
looking.
they're just like they go anywhere.
Yeah,
They're just trying to find food by sliding around, right?
yeah, pretty much. I think they're just kind of checking stuff out. I don't think you'll find a bass up shallow in the middle of the winter. I think you got to go deep, and that's the only spot you're gonna find them. But everything has its exceptions. But
Sure.
yeah, it's.
But
I
generally
think. I
speaking,
think.
it is
I
it
think.
is it is a migration, right? Like, here we
Yeah. I
go.
so I think what makes it's definitely the same distinction, but what makes it a little bit crazier and seem like it's not quite the same thing is that their whole ecosystem is within that lake, where
Yeah.
their
Mhm.
their ecosystem is within this like 1,000-acre lake.
Yep.
So that 1,000 acres is all they have to play with. That's their whole world.
Right, right,
So it just makes it a lot easier for them to, move. It's not as a big of a commitment.
right. Yeah.
So they might get a wild hair up their ass, or think they gotta move from point A to point B and just do it one day, and then just be like, whoops, and then go back because it's not that big of a deal.
I
Where the birds have to like
gotcha.
make a decision: should I fly thousands of miles today?
Right,
Just
and when they get caught in a snowstorm, they just have to hunker down and fucking wait it out. But for the most
exactly.
part, fish are making that move, hanging out, and then
Yeah.
shifting kind of seasonally, like you said. It seems like.
Yeah, for sure. They are.
Yeah.
They are. Like when
Oh,
you're
okay.
looking for fish, you're moving into there's times of years too, like when you're walleye, for example, like when you're in the summer months, they will move into like a more gradual drop offs, where it's, like
Mm-hmm.
adjacent to like steep drop offs, but a lot of times they'll be on the like more sloping, like it'll start, you know 10, 11, 12, 13, and it'll just, as it's going, it's a gradual
Nice
drop off.
gradual. Yeah.
And then when you get closer to the colder months and stuff, they'll be on the steepest drop off you can find, where it
Oh,
goes,
okay.
from shallow to deep.
Right.
So then
Just
they have that
bam.
option to just drop off, as like that, when they need to.
Right. Sure.
So I think they do move very similarly. They just literally live in two different worlds. And if the birds had the same uh situation, it would be the same thing. Or like,
Right.
some of the fish, it's the same kind of shit,
It is.
where depending on
Yep.
where they live or what they do, they have to do that. Like some of the salmon that have to go
Yeah.
way the hell upstream,
Right. Yeah. And that's actually where, like, this this teaching packet from the Fish and Wildlife Service goes, to sort of drive home their point, because
Yeah.
in the end, this fish and wildlife packet is
Hmm.
about fish migration and how to help it along, and how things get
Oh.
in the way. You know how, like, uh, humans have put up dams and culverts and
Oh,
stuff like
yeah.
that, and
Yeah.
it's just like, that we don't have to build stuff that way. We can build stuff that keeps the water flowing, and that's
Mhm.
really what that's the end thing about this is, like, let's teach about, like, don't forget fish have to move, so don't get in their way so much.
Sure.
um So there's probably going to be some things here because remember episode 33 we did the steelhead versus trout.
Mm-hmm.
And so in there, we talked a little bit about this. And so here's I'll just do some vocabulary from the packet.
Nice.
Andromus is a fish that is born in freshwater and then migrates to the ocean to grow into adulthood before migrating back to the freshwater. So that's exactly what you were just talking about, Tim. It's that, like, it's the salmon, right? They're born, then they go through this migration out to the ocean, they grow up, and they come back up. And that shit is the easy stuff to point to, right? That's like the TV, that's like the popular TV thing. Like, that's the eye-catching, easy thing to talk about. And yeah, that's one hell of a migration because you're literally leaving the ocean to swim up a body of water so far that it turns fresh, gets to the right temperature, and it meets all those criteria that you were already talking about with the lake fish, right? Like, they have to get so far up that fresh water that it meets the right criteria for making a bed, for the eggs to survive,
Exactly. Yeah.
And so,
and they take so long swimming up too that they could be narrated by like Morgan Freeman. Where like I don't think you could do that in like the freshwater situation where we're dealing with it's too fast. You'd have to have somebody explain it a little bit quicker because Morgan Freeman,
like the Micro Machine guy from the 90s. Remember him?
Oh yeah, just intense. They're gonna move. Not like Morgan Freeman's just like, they start in the ocean and they move. That kind of shit. I'm not gonna keep going with it. Just that great. Slow, just keep going. Yeah,
you're gonna get hired off of that. Just that 3 seconds there. Someone's gonna be hitting us up on realaf.tv/contact and saying like, I need a voiceover guy.
We need that guy. Yeah, hit me. I'll do it. Hit me up.
That's right. Do it. We can do voiceover. Yep. Listen to this mic. This is clear. We're set up for it. Tim can do voiceovers. Okay, so then I'm gonna fuck this word up. Catadromus. Maybe I didn't. Catadromus. Yeah, catadromus is a fish born in the ocean that returns to freshwater as a juvenile before migrating back to the ocean to spawn. So it's like the reverse of what we just talked about, pretty much. Apparently the American eel does that, which we did an episode on too. Totally forgot that.
So their migration is less about water temperature and more about the age cycle. That's weird. I'm sure that happens with the birds too, but where they're just like, I'm a juvie now. I gotta swim upstream, and then as soon as just like, what do you? I feel like it's an American Ninja Warrior. I gotta get all the way there and slap that button before I smash, dude. Once I get up there and I hit it, I have proved myself. And then the girls are just like, you are an American Ninja Warrior. Come back.
Fertilize myself.
I'm ready to have your babies.
And that is the reason why people go on American Ninja Warrior.
Exactly. It's all about getting laid.
It's the fastest who gets paid and the fastest who gets laid.
Oh, yeah.
So the last vocabulary word I got is diadromus. And this is a two-way migration.
Like, clip that shit.
What's that?
Sorry. I was like, we need a producer to be like, clip that shit, and then just put those clips out. And they'll just be like, this week on Real AF TV, it's the fastest who gets paid and the fastest who gets laid. And people be like, this is a fishing podcast? What the Sorry.
No, I know though. I'm with you. Okay, so the diadromus is a two-way migration term for fish, I guess. So it's just that's it. It's typically used to describe the cataramus fish migration that I just talked about, where they're born in the ocean and then they return to fresh water before and go back to the ocean.
Okay.
But it's only it's I believe that the way I sort of read it, because the freshwater fish migrate too, right? And that's diadramus too, where it's just like boop boop. There's that back and forth. There's that two.
Sure, yep.
Yeah. And so this is how it gets more into freshwater, because river fish, like the gar, we talked a little bit about the gar in episode 34, if you remember, dams, yo. That's what we talked about, like how dams are getting in the way. And a lot of this stuff,
yeah, right.
It really overlaps that. Not what we've talked about so far, but the stuff that I'm about to get into is just the river movement. Like the gar doesn't come up to the Twin Cities anymore, but if you go down to like the border of Iowa, you can catch gar.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all the locks and dams and shit that they've done
right.
to, whatever movement and money that comes out of the Twin Cities with ships.
Right. That was with catfish too, right?
I think so.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's what you're talking about in 34.
I think so. Yeah. We definitely made a lot of references to it in that episode. And that's why I said this might overlap a little bit. If you're new, welcome.
Right.
Awesome. Here's some stuff. But if you're been with the podcast for a minute, this might sound a little bit, but it's so similar. Just the fact that you're not starting in the ocean makes it a freshwater migration, right? Because these are just they're fish that are always in the river, and they just swim pretty decent distances.
Yeah.
Up river or down river, whatever.
Right.
They migrate throughout the river system.
Yep. Yeah, the definitely the moving water and the rivers and everything. That definitely makes a lot more sense of how much more they would migrate when they move, So
yeah.
Yep. And different times, depending on what kind of, if you're in, I'm sure tidal waters have completely different stuff too, because I know that the tides react differently during the different times of year. Like even here in Minnesota, like our Lake Superior is big enough that in the middle of winter, the tides will pull in waves big enough that you can go surf, but it only happens in winter.
Yeah.
So people are putting on wetsuits going up there when the water temperatures are like frigid. If you ever see those pictures of the guys that are surfing and they got like just icicle beards, that's people surfing freaking Lake Superior because they're going and the water's like pretty much cold and like close enough to freezing.
Yeah.
But the body of water is so big and the water keeps moving that it just doesn't freeze over completely.
Right.
Yep. So I'm sure that plays a big role in a lot of different spots too, with the tides and stuff. If your body of water is big enough, the tides affect it. I'm sure that plays a role in everything too.
Sure.
So
yeah, definitely.
And crazy stuff. I've never really thought about it.
Yeah.
As far as like the migration patterns go with the different tides and everything, but I'm sure, if I ever get a chance to really start going and fishing, I mean, doesn't this make you appreciate what a professional bass fisherman goes through when they're on the different circuits and they have to go fish tidal waters and all these different stuffs, and they know they need to know the migration of all the fish on all the different bodies of water. You're not dealing with just a bass is here at this time of year. It's like you need to know what the bass is doing at this time of year on this body of water and why everything is different. And then just like I said, they fish tidal waters. There are fresh bodies of water that are tidal waters because they're big rivers. Yep. And then you have to know what they're doing there too. It's and the points count. So when you make that angler of the year, that means that you consistently put fish in the boat regardless of what body of water you were on.
Right.
So that's a gnarly accomplishment, man.
Big time. And dude, I'm so glad. Excuse me. Got a little bit of a upper respiratory again thing here from moving and who knows. Anyways, I'll move on. I'll move past that. But dude, I'm so glad that you brought that up because that is exactly it. Like the that is exactly like the thing that made me appreciate this as I was studying it. It made me go, "Holy shit, dude. This is cool." And this is why I even opened up to you, right? Like opened up with just like, "Hey Tim, hit us with some experience right away." Because
Yeah.
this is migration. You do have to study it. You do have to learn these
Yeah.
patterns. You do have to pay attention if
Right.
you're trying to put fish in the boat. Even if you're just trying to
Exactly.
catch fish, like even if you're just out there doing it for the sport, it doesn't matter. But to
Yeah.
be good at this sport, migration is a part of it. Like this is why Real AF TV is we started it, right? Like we want to learn.
Right.
It's like you were already doing this stuff, Tim, but now to think about it as migration and frame it like this, like I feel like I do think about the pros differently. I think about the way that you fish differently, even. I to wrap it in this bubble, to wrap it in this wrapper, this word migration is like, fuck, man,
Yeah.
damn,
Yeah.
that's
Uh-huh.
cool. You're studying migration.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you gotta learn where them fish are moving to. That's
Yeah,
the, step one is
right,
finding the fish.
right,
You can
exactly.
there's a lot to fishing, but if you're fishing the wrong spot, if you're fishing the right spot in the wrong time of year, I guess is a kind of weird way to put it, but
No,
it's like you could have been catching fish there and just be like, this is the money spot. Not this time of year, buddy. Like you could have caught the
right,
biggest fish you ever caught in that spot,
right,
but you fish it in spring instead of summer. No,
right.
no chance.
No
It's just like
chance.
the crappies. It's just like the crappies. Tie on a bobber and go with the crappie minnow and go up into like 4 feet of water in those weeds that they're in the springtime. You're not gonna catch shit. There's nothing there right now. Maybe a small sunfish will come and peck at your bait. Maybe a bass will swim by and eat it. I guarantee you're not catching a crappie
Sure.
in the lake I'm talking about. Maybe some of the other lakes it'll work out.
Yeah, but you're
But
just talking
but
about like a clear water situation
and
almost.
that's
Like
and that's
that
yeah,
that's a pretty broad stroke, but
and that's where
easy
that's
enough
where it all plays in. Like,
conversation.
if you know the lake that I fish, if you fish certain spots the same time of year, you're not catching dick.
Right.
So it's like it all differs, and it all matters on the time of year and the migration and how everything's moving and stuff.
Right.
And
Right.
once you learn it on one body of water, you can apply it to other places. Like how we were talking about that,
Mm-hmm.
Tasmania.
Mm-hmm.
That it's their spring or their fall, and then
Yep.
you can just be like, okay, so it's not, even though it's summer for us, I got to go to my fall patterns and try to look there and
Right.
start there,
Right.
where
Right.
you should be able to put that together as long as it's a lake. But
Right.
if you're dealing with a completely different body of water, then who knows? You got to
Right.
do your research and try to figure it out. But there's definitely, they call them patterns for a reason.
Yeah.
It's, you're trying to
Migration patterns.
establish
Like
what's happening.
like you may not hear migration pattern in fishing
Right.
as a regular term, but you hear
Yeah.
it with birds.
You just hear patterns. They don't even,
Right. They
that's,
don't throw
you hear,
migration in there, but that's what it
they,
is.
it's just a pattern. Yep. It's like these, that fish might have, for whatever reason, they moved up into the docks on that side of the dock into the shadow. That's where they are,
Yeah.
and you catch one fish and you go, oh, okay. And for whatever reason, not all, but a lot of them will do the same thing on the same time, on the same day.
Uh-huh.
And if you can put it into a similar situation, like that's where you're going to find them.
Yeah.
One day you might not see anything underneath the dock. The next day you catch a bass underneath the dock and you go, oh, let me try this next dock. And then you catch another bass underneath that dock. And you go, all right, that's two.
Yep.
Let's see if we can get a third. You get a third, and then you're like, boom,
We have
we
a
put
pattern.
together a pattern.
Yeah.
I forget the saying. I got to find the saying, but it's there's an awesome saying that's something where it's like you
Oh,
catch one fish, you got lucky. Two fish, something else. I can't remember what the second one is, but it's like three fish, that's a pattern. Like once
nice.
you get that third one, it's like
Yeah,
now
you should find
you're
it. We'll
onto
see if we
something.
can meme it on make a meme on it, or like make a
Oh
graphic
yeah.
out of it or something like that for
Yeah. Yeah,
Instagram.
I'll try to find it. Yeah.
Yeah. So before we jump off, I want to talk about the things with where there's a little bit of overlap with the episode 34 on dams. And because I really like how, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but I really like how this learning plan that the Fish and Wildlife Service put
Yeah.
this to kind of like drive home that it's migration, and
Yeah.
fish got to move, fish got to travel. Um, they're like humans use roads to migrate. That's
Yep.
they these roads are often twisty and turny, and they go all over the place. Even if you're on the same road, they still move and cross a
Yeah.
lot of different things like lakes and rivers and things like that. So you probably don't think about the water that much, but it now has a road over it, through it,
Yeah.
whatever that particular moment was. And you probably, if you live in an area with water, with rivers and lakes, a lot of rivers and lakes, you
Yeah.
probably don't even really see the culverts, because the culverts are the small tubes that they just put under
Yeah.
the road to let the water through.
Sure.
Um, in Minnesota, they tend to be very noticeable because with our weather, they fluctuate a lot. So you know where they are if
Mm.
you drive over it enough, because in the wintertime, it has changed shape. And in the summertime, it has changed shape. And now the
Yeah.
road's like, you know, the road ebb and
Right.
flows literally where the culverts are.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And
All of a sudden,
so,
there's just a lump there.
yep. And you're like, yeah, culvert.
Yep. Found it.
So, um, there are these tubes in the water, basically, or
Yeah.
these tubes under the road that try to get the water. But the problem that a lot of these culverts have, they showed in this plan, is like it's a tube that just lets the water flow through, but now all of a sudden there's a 3-foot drop off the other end because the river was going downhill, and all they did was let
Oh.
the river flow through,
Yeah.
not even thinking about that there's probably going to be fish trying to go up river. You get what I'm saying
Right.
there?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
And now they've created like a waterfall scenario where the fish would
exactly.
literally have to jump up a waterfall to
Right.
keep going.
Right.
Yeah.
And most fish aren't adapted to that. And so they used the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia, where they did like a case study for this specific thing.
Yeah.
So there's a river called the Blue Brook, and it's pretty fast because it's
Okay.
coming out of the mountains, coming out of the
Sure.
Appalachians
Yeah.
there.
Picking up
And
some speed.
so the Blue Brook it's pretty fast, and it does what mountains do with rivers. It goes all over the place, and so the
Right.
road
Yeah.
that goes across this river also goes all over the place. Slows down, speeds up. It just
Sure.
water's going to do that depending on what's in its way. But
Right.
what this does is it runs down to a valley. It hits the Buffalo River, which is the big one. The Buffalo goes out to the Chesapeake. So there you have your connection into the ocean, right? Just to prove its journey from mountain down to ocean. It's a river, hits a bigger river, then it dumps itself into the ocean. Um, so it's got some good brook trout in it. And in the summer, they try to go up to get into that cooler mountain water, that water that's, at the higher
Ah.
elevations, it's just naturally cooler. And
Sure.
now they have these culverts that are in the way. And it's just
Mm.
like, if you were to cut the culvert through, then these brook trout would go up. They just keep swimming up,
Yeah.
because if you cut it through, almost like a bridge, creating a bridge out of it, instead of just
Yeah.
making it a pipe that drains the water from up high,
Right.
you're doing the brook trout
Mm.
a favor. And
Right.
I'm saying all that to just get to the point of the the point of this learning plan, I'll call it, right? The point of this learning plan was to point that out, that like there's a good way and a bad way to make a culvert sometimes. There's a good way and a bad way to interrupt water flow. And
Sure.
this is a situation where a brook trout, a tasty fish from what I understand,
Yes.
is having trouble reaching its summertime breeding grounds. And
Sure.
you just drill a hole that goes up and downhill instead of just downhill, sort of
Right.
situation, and just you don't see it in the air like birds. And that's kind of like bringing this whole topic
Right.
full circle. Is it's happening out there. So
Yeah.
you a fisher, you an advocate for the fish, keep your eye out for this sort of stuff. That's kind
Yeah.
of where all this is going. And I wasn't trying to bring it out there as like a public service announcement sort of thing,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
we're learning.
Right. I mean, it all makes sense. We just think that we're going to be able to make it, you think about the water movement, you don't always think about the animals that you're dealing with.
Right.
But like when you put it in perspective to a bird can fly wherever it wants. We're not fucking with its air. But if we put up big nets,
Right.
it'd cause some problems.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think about all the different like similarities and how it's totally the same, just like on a smaller scale for most of the lakes around here. And I didn't really think about it. I know they say migrate. I've heard migration a whole bunch and I've never even thought about it. It's
Right.
weird that like we had the opposite where you're like, oh, birds migrate, fish migrate. And I'm like, yeah, fish migrate and birds migrate. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's like I always knew birds migrate, but I never even like thought about them being the same, one and the same thing, or
Yeah.
trying to correlate any of it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, now we'll definitely have to. I'll do my research and
Yeah. Yeah.
some first person out there and try to be like, is anything changing with the birds? I know sometimes the birds can tell you to help you find where the fish are because they'll be feeding on
Yep.
bait,
In the
so that
ocean, at
helps you.
least. I've heard
Yeah,
that. Yep.
but as far as like, does the bird movement have changed anything with the fish movement?
Right.
I don't know.
Who knows? Help fund us by
No.
going to patreon.com/realeftv, which
Yes.
we're going to get into right now. That break. Then we're going to jump over to the random take where we're simply going to talk about 5 simple questions. That's it. It's going to be so easy, so simple. And we're going to get into that right after the break. So hit it.
I got 5 on it. We gonna ask some questions. Yeah. I got 5 on it.